You ever walk into a room and realize everyone's been lying to your face? That's what happened to me. One Friday morning, I brought cookies to the office and left with every secret they thought I'd never find. Keep watching, because this isn't a story about revenge. It's about power and how one woman turned heartbreak into her blueprint for control. My name is Naomi. I'm 33 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into the beginning of something that finally belonged to me. The office shimmered that Friday morning, decked out like a Pinterest board come to life. Paper snowflakes clung to the windows, little battery candles blinked on desks, and a $12 tree from Walmart blinked its crooked rhythm in the break room. I had brought gingerbread cookies on a ceramic snowman plate. Nobody touched them, but everyone said they looked so cute, which somehow hurt more than if they'd said nothing. Outside, downtown Milwaukee wore its first real coat of winter. Snow like sifted sugar on brick sidewalks, wind carving halos around car roofs. Inside, everything smelled like coffee syrup and printer toner and the faint metallic chill that followed people in from the cold. Someone was humming along with Bing Crosby, off-key and content. Phones buzzed with last-minute campaign notes no one intended to answer until January. I stood near the coffee machine, letting the steam rise into my face until my glasses fogged. The heat felt steady, grounding. Across the glass wall of the conference room, a small crowd gathered around a pile of red and silver wrapping paper. I could see Jeremy's jacket draped over a chair, Cassie's glitter nails flashing as she untied a ribbon. Their laughter reached me through the closed door, muffled but unmistakable. It carried a note I used to recognize when I still believed everything between us was safe. Jeremy had been my boyfriend for 3 years, 3 winters, 3 birthdays, 3 versions of me who had believed in us. Cassie was from marketing, all confidence and perfume and nicknames that never quite fit. She called me sweetheart, but her eyes never matched the word. I told myself again that I was imagining it, that I was projecting tension onto harmless smiles, that the distance I felt was just fatigue, not betrayal. I promised myself I wouldn't ruin another holiday with suspicion. Not again. I walked into the conference room carrying my secret Santa bag, silver, small, a splash of blue tissue poking out like breath in cold air, and took a seat at the far end of the table. Jeremy looked up, his grin automatic, the kind that used to pull me in. For a second, habit made me smile back. The Bluetooth speaker blinked on the wall. Bing crooned about white Christmases, the tree lights blinked in lazy sync. Someone joked about ugly sweaters. Normal life in motion until the screen on the wall flickered and the music hiccuped. A message window bloomed across the shared display, blue and white bubbles, a line of casual intimacy that wasn't meant for public eyes. I saw names. I saw words that didn't belong to me. The room kept moving for a heartbeat longer before the meaning landed. Silence has its own gravity. It pulled every sound out of the air. The laughter thinned into a fragile quiet. I felt my pulse in my palms, my throat, behind my eyes. It took one breath to understand, another to steady, the rest to decide. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Jeremy's face told me everything. Recognition, fear, regret, all tangled in a second that felt like slow motion. Cassie reached for her phone, fumbling. I reached for nothing. I simply breathed. Someone asked softly, "Is it still connected?" Another voice said, "Maybe unplug it." Hands moved, cords rustled, the image vanished. The moment, though, stayed, printed somewhere permanent behind my eyes. Jeremy started toward me, his mouth shaping my name, an apology maybe, an explanation, a script already fraying. I lifted my hand, not to stop him, just to mark the boundary that had finally appeared between us. "It's fine," I said, though it wasn't. "You don't have to explain right now." Because I understood something else in that second, that I didn't need the performance of confrontation. I didn't need to win the room or prove what was true. The truth was already standing there, quiet and undeniable. I slipped out before anyone could follow. The hallway smelled like pine cleaner and copier ink. My boots squeaked against the tile. Through the window, snow was falling thicker now, softening the sharp edges of the city. Each flake looked deliberate, like the sky rewriting the morning. At my desk, I gathered the small things that were mine: headphones, a notebook, the ceramic mug with a chip on the rim, the cookies I'd baked the night before. I packed slowly, methodically, letting the calm in my movements become a kind of defiance. Jeremy appeared in the doorway. His voice was careful, almost professional. "Naomi, please, can we talk? It's not—" I shook my head. "Not here." His shoulders sagged, as if the script had ended sooner than he'd rehearsed. I didn't wait for him to finish the line. I turned off my monitor, zipped my coat, and picked up my bag. Walking out of that office didn't feel like leaving. It felt like crossing back into myself. The laughter behind me faded, replaced by the muted rush of snow and traffic. The city air stung my cheeks, clean and honest. At the corner cafe, I stopped for coffee. Black this time, no syrup, no foam hearts. The barista handed it over with a smile that didn't ask questions. I sat by the window, watching people hurry through the white blur outside, each wrapped in their own small world. I opened my phone, scrolled through the photos from the last few months, the dinners, the campaign brainstorms, the moments that now carried new meaning. Then I opened a blank note and typed 2 words: "Start over." That simple. No anger, no revenge plan, just direction. The next hour passed in quiet logistics, emailing HR about personal days, updating my portfolio link, sending a polite message to my manager, taking some time to refocus after the holidays. We'll circle back about next quarter's projects. No details, no drama. The clean kind of truth. Outside, the snow kept falling. I thought about the version of me that had spent months collecting small proofs, trying to control the story by catching it in screenshots. That woman had been afraid of silence. I wasn't, not anymore. By late afternoon, the city turned gold at the edges, the streetlights blinking through the snowfall like cautious hope. I walked home through the hush, my breath rising in soft clouds. Every step away from that building felt lighter. That night, my apartment smelled of cinnamon and resolve. I set the untouched cookies on the counter, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. A blank document waited, its cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I began to write, not about betrayal, but about reinvention, about how sometimes the truest power comes from walking away without spectacle, without witnesses, carrying only your dignity and the certainty that you deserve better. I wrote until midnight. When I finally stopped, my hands were trembling, not from sadness, but from something that felt dangerously close to freedom. In the morning, I'd start applying for new positions, maybe even launch the small design studio I'd daydreamed about for years. The name came to me as the snowlight shifted against the window. Blueprint. Not as a symbol of revenge, but of rebuilding. Because the truth is, power isn't what you take from someone else. It's what you reclaim from the silence they leave behind. They laughed when I walked out. They thought I was retreating, but I was only closing a door so another could finally open. Cassie didn't come in Monday. Jeremy did. He wore the same jacket he'd had on Friday, creased at the sleeves, wrinkled at the collar. The fabric still held a faint trace of cologne, the kind that once made me turn my head when he passed. Now it just smelled like a closed chapter. His eyes were rimmed red, not from crying, but from the absence of sleep. The kind of red that belongs to regret that hasn't found its words yet. I didn't say anything. I didn't look at him. But in the reflection of the office window, I saw him standing behind my chair. He stayed there for 34 slow seconds, maybe waiting for courage, maybe waiting for forgiveness, and then walked away. The building felt quieter than usual. December quiet. The kind that sits between Christmas playlists and the hum of the heating vents. Everyone's voices came softer, like paper over glass. They stopped by my cubicle with practiced sympathy, asking if I was doing okay, as though I were the one who'd broken something. I smiled. I said I was fine, and kept typing. Because I wasn't broken. I was ready. At 9:52 a.m., the HR email arrived. Subject line: scheduling a formal review, December 19th. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't tremble. I had already sent the files Sunday night, with my attorney quietly copied at the bottom of the thread. It wasn't revenge, it was record-keeping. Self-respect written in carbon copy. Yes, I had a lawyer. No, I hadn't told anyone. Not when I first saw the messages. Not when I learned Cassie had duplicated my proposal and signed her name above mine. Not when Jeremy started working late, but kept turning up in photos from the lakeside tavern. They hadn't hidden much. They just assumed I wouldn't look, that I was too polite, too soft, too trusting to notice. That was the real betrayal. Not the lies, the underestimation. The meeting was set for Tuesday morning, 8:30 sharp, HR boardroom. I laid out my clothes the night before. Navy slacks, white blouse, small gold buttons that caught the light. The same heels I'd worn for my first interview 3 years ago. Full circle, same hallway, different woman. The boardroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and nerves. The table's steel edge felt colder than it looked. A pitcher of water waited untouched. Cassie sat at the far end, her posture careful, flanked by her manager and an HR representative. Jeremy wasn't there. He'd chosen to join by video. Distance as shield. I placed my folder neatly in front of me. Tabs aligned, labels crisp. Years of being organized suddenly paying off in dignity. They asked if I wanted to add anything beyond the written complaint. I said I did. I slid the first packet across the table. Time-stamped emails showing Cassie opening my drafts from the shared drive, editing the headers, saving copies minutes before submission deadlines. She'd deleted logs, but the mirrored backups told the truth. Next came the scheduling sheets, rows of data showing how Cassie and Jeremy had swapped shifts, coordinating coverage that somehow allowed them both to leave early on the same afternoons. The patterns spoke louder than I ever could. Then I presented access records. Internal logins showing that Cassie had entered a client folder tagged as restricted, one I'd created, one she wasn't authorized to open. Her manager frowned, scanning the metadata on page 3. I didn't gloat. I simply waited, my pen poised, the quiet ticking of the wall clock marking each second of disbelief. Finally came the messages. Not the personal ones. Those didn't belong here. These were the professional ones. The ones that mattered, words calling me naive, unstable, unfit for leadership. Lines typed with confidence behind closed doors. The HR representative asked, "Have you ever displayed erratic behavior at work, Naomi?" I said no. Then I turned a page. There was an unsent draft email Cassie had accidentally saved to the wrong folder, addressed to HR, feigning concern for my mental well-being. The language was formal, deliberate, almost caring, until you read the intention behind it. Cassie whispered, "I didn't send that. It was just a draft." I said, "Intent matters." Her voice faltered. Mine didn't. Jeremy's voice came through the speaker, flat, distant, wrapped in static. "I didn't know she was doing that," he said. "I thought it was just between us." A pause, then softer. "I'm sorry." I looked at the small rectangle of his face on the screen. "You're sorry because it's visible now," I said quietly. The room held its breath. No shouting, no tears, just silence that made the truth unmistakable. The HR lead thanked me for my composure and said they'd review the documentation by the end of the week. Procedure language. Necessary distance. I gathered my folder, aligning its edges one last time, and rose. Cassie stared down at her hands, turning her wedding ring in slow circles. I watched the movement only long enough to recognize the human fragility of it. Then I walked out. The hallway smelled of copier ink and faint citrus from someone's perfume. Outside the glass doors, winter sunlight flashed against parked cars. As I passed accounting, someone looked up. "Naomi?" she said. "Yeah?" She smiled, small, genuine. "You did good." I nodded, the kind of nod that carries gratitude without letting it spill. That evening, I walked home the long way, past the frozen river where the wind carved little spirals over the ice. Jeremy's apartment building glowed a few blocks away. I didn't look up, didn't need to. The chapter had already closed itself. There was peace in the cold air, in the sound of my boots on the bridge, in the way the city lights blurred against the frost. Everything unnecessary had fallen away. My phone buzzed. My lawyer, her voice steady, practiced. HR had scheduled a secondary meeting with Cassie's manager. That meant they were taking the evidence seriously. I thanked her. She asked if I wanted to pursue damages. I said I'd think about it, though I already knew I wouldn't. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about being done. I spent that night sorting through files, archiving old projects, labeling new folders for ideas that were finally mine alone. I brewed tea instead of wine, wanting clarity instead of comfort. When I finally sat on the couch, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. For the first time in months, I slept without rehearsing defenses in my head. By morning, snow had crusted the window ledge. I opened the blinds and watched it sparkle in the early light. Somewhere in that shimmer, I felt the edge of possibility, small, sharp, and bright. HR would handle what needed to be handled. My job was to build forward, not back. At lunch, I walked downtown, stopping by the bookstore where I used to hide during deadlines. The owner remembered. Me. "Back on your break?" she asked. I smiled. "Something like that." I bought a blank journal, heavy paper, soft cover. On the first page, I wrote, "Rebuild, not revenge, not closure, just progress." That evening, I opened my laptop and updated my resume. I changed the tagline at the top from marketing associate to creative strategist. It wasn't official yet, but it felt true. Titles begin inside you long before anyone prints them on a card. The rest of the week passed in slow motion. Cassie's desk stayed empty. Jeremy sent one email, brief, professional, almost apologetic, asking about transferring a client account. I replied with one line, "Please direct all project communication through HR." Boundary set. Curtain closed. Friday came with an email from HR. Subject line, "Outcome review." They confirmed the findings, policy violations, reassignments, confidential actions to follow. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. The relief didn't come as fireworks. It came as quiet steadiness in my chest. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it exhales. I packed up early, slid my notebook into my bag, and walked outside into a soft swirl of snow. The streetlights flickered on, scattering halos through the cold. My reflection followed beside me in every shop window. Same coat, same hair, but posture different. Shoulders back, eyes forward. At the corner, I passed the cafe where I'd sat that first day. The barista waved. "Back for the usual?" she asked. "Not today," I said. "Something new. Surprise me?" "Exactly." When she handed me the cup, the sleeve read, "Courage tastes like coffee." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. I walked to the bridge again, the river now a sheet of mirrored ice. My breath rose in white curls. I thought about everything that had happened, the emails, the meeting, the words said and unsaid, and I realized it wasn't the exposure that freed me. It was the decision to stay calm when chaos begged me not to, the choice to walk instead of fight for a room that didn't deserve my peace. The world around me glittered with frost, and for the first time I felt like part of it, not frozen, but shining. I didn't go to the holiday potluck. Cassie didn't either. Jeremy, I heard, had taken sick leave. The office felt altered after the review, like the air itself had shifted weight. Not louder, not quieter, just more awake. People looked at me differently now, not pitying, not curious, but aware, as if the space I occupied had finally become visible. For years, I'd been the woman who stayed late, the one who covered shifts without being asked, who printed agendas no one read and smiled through the silence that followed. That version of me had kept things running. It had also kept me small. I thought about that while clearing the stack of untouched reports from my desk. The fluorescent light above me flickered, then steadied. The hum of the printer filled the background, steady as breath. I realized how much of my life had sounded like that, useful, predictable, forgettable. No more. That Wednesday, I stayed late again, but not to clean up anyone else's work. This time, it was mine. The kind of project I'd been building quietly for months, half afraid to share. An ad campaign that carried edges, confidence, humor. Something that sounded like my actual voice. I printed it, the paper still warm in my hands, and slid the pages into a bright red folder. For once, there was no smiley face on the sticky note. No exclamation mark softening the request. Just my name. Full name. I left it on the creative director's desk before heading out into the crisp Milwaukee night. Snow had crusted over the parking lot. The sky felt close enough to touch. The next morning, before I'd even finished my coffee, her assistant appeared at my cubicle. "She'd like to see you." Inside her office, the blinds were half drawn, sunlight striping the table in bars of pale gold. She held my proposal open, pen resting on the margin. "Did you write this alone?" "Yes." "It's sharper than your usual tone." Her gaze lingered on me. "I stopped apologizing for my instincts," I said. A slow smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She reached into a drawer and pulled out another folder, the one Cassie had submitted a week earlier. "Interesting," she said, "because this isn't the same. And now I know whose work that earlier draft really echoed." She didn't say more. She didn't have to. When I left her office, my hands were steady. For the first time, I felt like the story was catching up to the truth. 2 days later, another meeting. Smaller room. Just HR and the creative director. The chairs were close enough for honesty. They offered me the promotion. Interim Director of Brand Strategy. Pending review, pending paperwork, but the offer itself was real. I didn't smile immediately. I asked, "What happens to Cassie's position?" "She's on unpaid suspension while we complete the investigation," the HR rep said carefully. "And Jeremy?" "His contract is under evaluation." I nodded. That was enough. No satisfaction, no victory speech. Just balance restored. That Friday, they asked me to move into the corner cubicle, the one with the window that actually opened a few inches in spring, the one I'd looked toward for 3 years. The move took 10 minutes. My new chair adjusted without the squeak I'd grown used to. Someone from design dropped off a small plant. Another left a post-it that said simply, "Finally." I didn't throw a party. I bought myself a peppermint mocha instead, extra whipped cream, the small kind of celebration that leaves no mess behind. I sat by the window, watching snow drift through the late-day light, buses carving thin gray paths through slush. I snapped a photo and sent it to my sister. "Got promoted," I typed. "Didn't scream." She replied within a minute. "Knew you wouldn't." "I would've." I laughed out loud. It felt good, easy, alive. Work settled into a new rhythm. People stopped whispering when I walked by. Some offered congratulations. Others just nodded in a quiet truce. I answered emails, finalized a client brief, drafted the next campaign outline. For the first time, leadership didn't feel like permission. It felt like alignment. That evening, as I gathered my coat, the hallway lights dimmed to their automatic night mode. I passed HR on my way out. The door was half open, voices low. Inside, Cassie sat across from a corporate representative I hadn't seen before. Papers were spread across the table. Her posture was stiff, defensive. I paused just long enough to register the scene. Professional accountability, nothing more. Then I turned away. There was no anger left, just quiet understanding. Every choice builds a record, even the ones we think are invisible. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing up the stairwell. Each sound felt like punctuation, a full stop, a new line. Outside, the wind carried flakes across the empty plaza, brushing cold against my face. I breathed it in, steady and unshaken. The next week moved quickly. Meetings, presentations, plans for the new quarter. I rewrote team procedures, built clearer credit lines on shared projects, created spaces for others to speak up before they disappeared into silence. People noticed. They started to send drafts to me for feedback, trusting I'd protect their work. That meant more than the title. On Wednesday afternoon, the creative director stopped by my cubicle. She looked at the plant on my desk, its single green shoot leaning toward the light. "You settling in?" "Trying to," I said. She smiled. "You're doing more than trying. Keep that voice in your proposals. It's exactly what we needed." When she left, I sat for a long moment, tracing the steam from my coffee as it curled upward and vanished. It struck me how small the motions of strength can be. Staying late for yourself instead of others, putting your name on your work, saying no without apology. Late that evening, I walked the hallway one last time before heading out. The cleaning crew had already started vacuuming, the low hum mixed with the soft rattle of wind against the windows. I paused at the far end, looking back at the rows of cubicles, each holding its own quiet story. Mine had changed shape. Outside, the snow had melted into thin ribbons of water reflecting the streetlights. I crossed the parking lot slowly, the air cold enough to bite but not enough to hurt. My phone buzzed, a message from HR confirming the formal appointment would be finalized by January. I stared at the screen, smiling this time. When I reached the car, I looked back once at the building, its glass facade catching the amber glow of the city. The reflection stared back. Me, small but steady, wrapped in a coat that felt heavier from history than from fabric. I thought about Cassie, about Jeremy, about the version of myself that had once mistaken silence for professionalism. Growth isn't dramatic. It's quiet, sometimes almost invisible, like snow layering overnight. As I drove home, the city lights blurred through the windshield. I turned off the radio, letting the rhythm of the tires replace the music. My thoughts folded inward, soft but clear. This is what reclaiming looks like. Not triumph, not revenge, just motion forward. At home, I hung my coat, fed the cat, lit a candle that smelled faintly of vanilla and cedar. I set the red folder, the one that started it all, on the bookshelf, not as a trophy, as proof of change. Before bed, I checked my email one last time. A message from my sister waited. Proud of you. You always had the blueprint. You just needed to start building from it. I closed the laptop, smiled into the dark, and whispered, I'm building. Outside, the snow began again. Thin, quiet, determined. Christmas Eve fell on a Sunday that year. Milwaukee lay under a soft, white sheet of snow, glittering beneath the streetlights as if someone had gently shaken a snow globe over the entire city. The flakes drifted slowly, deliberate, unhurried, each one taking its time to land. Inside my apartment, the world felt smaller but warmer. No parties, no invitations, no calls I had to make out of obligation. Just me, a thick blanket, and a bowl of microwave mac and cheese cooling on the coffee table. The radiator hummed against the window. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor played an old jazz record, the faint crackle between songs mixing with the wind outside. I didn't feel lonely. I felt released. The quiet wrapped itself around me, the kind that doesn't echo, the kind that sits deep in your bones when you finally stop pretending. Around 7, my phone buzzed once. Jeremy. The screen lit up with his name, the preview of a message. Can we talk? For a while, I just looked at it, the words glowing pale against the dark. The little dots pulsed at the top as though he were still typing, trying to add something more that might change the shape of what was already too late. I didn't open it. I didn't block him either. Some endings don't need punctuation. They fade like breath on glass, leaving no sharp edges behind. I set the phone face down and listened to the city breathing through the snow. Outside, a siren wailed and disappeared. Inside, the steam from my dinner curled upward and vanished. I thought of all the noise I used to fill silence with. Worry, apologies, questions I already knew the answers to. Tonight, there was only stillness. The next morning, Christmas Day, the sky was so clear it almost looked fake. I pulled on my black coat, wound my scarf tight, and walked to the park near the lake. The same bench Jeremy and I had used in spring when the world had seemed easier. Back then, we'd sat close enough to share the same breath. Now I sat alone, my boots buried in a small drift, the lake frozen smooth as glass beyond the trees. Families dotted the hills. Children slid down on plastic sleds, shrieking with joy. Dogs bounded through snowdrifts, shaking white crystals from their fur. A woman passed me carrying a mug that read, "Let it snow." I smiled because she looked content in the way I wanted to be, simple, unbothered, present. I had no one to meet that day, no gifts left to wrap, no expectations to chase. And yet the space felt full. The air itself seemed to say, "This is enough," because the only person I needed to meet again was myself. And I had. 3 days later, December 27th, the office reopened. The lobby smelled faintly of pine cleaner and burnt coffee. Holiday decorations drooped from the ceiling, their glitter already dulled. Cassie's nameplate was gone. Her desk cleared over the weekend. Jeremy's login had been deactivated. IT said he'd mailed back his badge with a one-line note. "Thank you for the opportunity." No one spoke about it outright, but you could feel the awareness ripple quietly through every floor. The same way wind moves through leaves. You don't see it. You just hear the shift. People didn't gossip. They adjusted. And somehow, respect settled into the space where pity might have been. A week later, I stood at the front of the conference room to deliver my first full campaign pitch as interim director. The projector hummed softly. My reflection hovered faintly over the title slide, layered against the company logo. My hands didn't shake. My voice found its rhythm the way music finds a key. I walked them through every slide, each choice, each reason. Questions came, but I was already prepared. The answers lived in my notes, in my pulse, in the quiet confidence I'd built from the ruins. When I finished, the room stayed silent for a second. Then one of the executives said, "This feels like a new era." I glanced at the screen behind me, the bold logo I'd designed glowing in sharp lines of blue and white. "That's the goal," I said. Applause followed, soft at first, then warmer. Afterward, I returned to my desk. On my chair sat a small silver gift bag lined with navy tissue. No tag, no note on the outside. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded card. "She stole your story. You rewrote the ending. No signature, just that." I read it twice. Then again. Whoever had written it knew. Maybe it was someone who'd watched from the sidelines, or someone who'd been through their own quiet storm. I didn't need to know. I slipped the note back into the bag and placed it in my top drawer beside a paperclip and a stick of peppermint gum. A reminder, not of revenge, but of resilience. That evening, when the office emptied and the city lights stretched long across the glass windows, I stayed a moment longer. The stillness reminded me of that first morning after everything broke. I opened the company's presentation control app on my phone, the one connected to every conference room screen. The list of saved devices appeared, a line of familiar names. At the bottom, Jeremy's iPhone. Still there, still active. For a second, I just stared at it, that small relic of chaos now reduced to a line of text. Then I tapped "Forget this device." The screen blinked once, then cleared. And that was it. Simple, quiet, final. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. That the screen they once used to reveal their secrets had turned into a mirror. Not for them, but for me. It reflected the woman who had walked through humiliation, anger, and silence, and still chosen composure. It showed how truth, once heavy, could become light when you finally stop carrying the need to prove it. I shut off the office lights, the hum fading into the steady pulse of winter wind outside. The lobby smelled faintly of peppermint from the holiday candles someone had forgotten to put away. As I stepped into the elevator, my reflection looked back in the mirrored wall, tired, maybe, but peaceful. The doors slid open on the ground floor. The night air met me like a clean page. Snow was falling again, slower now, each flake spinning gently through the amber streetlight glow. I pulled my coat tighter and stepped out into it. The city felt both empty and alive. Car horns muffled by snow, footsteps softened into whispers. I walked past shop windows dressed in tinsel, past couples holding hands, past a man humming carols under his breath. My path glowed faintly where the snow crunched underfoot, vanishing behind me as quickly as it formed. At the corner, I stopped, looked up at the pale moon hanging above the skyline. The clouds drifted across it like gauze. I thought about everything that had led here. The betrayal, the emails, the meetings, the silence, and I realized it wasn't any of that that defined me. It was the moment I decided to stay kind without being small, to stand tall without demanding an audience. I breathed in the cold until it filled every corner of my chest. The air bit sharp, honest, real. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. The snow kept falling, and I kept walking forward, steady, free. The new year rolled in quietly. No confetti, no champagne, no countdowns shouted through half-closed windows. Just snow dusting the ledge outside my apartment and the low hum of my space heater. I brewed a mug of sleepy time tea, curled up in flannel pajamas, and watched the sky trade black for silver. And somehow, that stillness felt like celebration. Not loud, but earned. The kind of peace that doesn't need witnesses. Work resumed with the slow rhythm of January. Projects reopened, emails refilled, calendars bloomed with meetings that all started the same way. Hope you had a good holiday. Mine was honest, uneventful, free. Before February arrived, an email from HR landed in my inbox. No balloons, no applause. Just a subject line that read, effective immediately. My title, Director of Brand Strategy, was no longer prefaced by interim. I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I exhaled, the kind that carries months of breath you didn't know you were holding. Ownership sat differently than ambition. It wasn't heavier or lighter. It was steadier, like weight distributed evenly after a long imbalance. That evening, I left the office after sunset. The glass walls caught the reflections of downtown lights, turning them into ribbons of gold. I walked past the conference room where everything had once cracked open and realized how far the echo had faded. Then, just when I thought the page had fully turned, life offered its small test of memory. A new intern, fresh-faced, full of questions, clutching a notebook too big for her hands, approached me in the hallway. She smiled the way people do when they're not sure if they should. "Is it true?" she asked. "What they say about the Christmas party?" I paused halfway through sipping my coffee. "What do they say?" "That you called out a cheating boyfriend and a coworker who stole your work. On the big screen." Her tone hovered between fascination and caution, unsure whether she was stepping into myth or minefield. I let the silence hang just long enough for her curiosity to soften. Then I smiled. "Some things don't need to be corrected." She laughed, a quick release of tension. "Well, either way, it's kind of inspiring." "It wasn't meant to be," I said. But when she walked off toward the conference room, ponytail swinging, I caught myself replaying her words. Maybe stories have lives of their own. Maybe truth travels differently once it's been earned. At first, the tale sounded like exaggeration, but beneath the whispers was something truer. The idea that silence could be strength, that composure could be armor. Maybe what survived wasn't scandal, but proof. Proof that quiet doesn't mean weak, that calm doesn't mean unaware, that a woman can choose not to shout and still be heard. I thought about everything that had led here, the nights I stayed late, the messages that shattered illusion, the steady climb back toward my own voice. Because I never screamed, I never begged, I never asked why. Instead, I waited, I observed, I prepared. And when the moment came, I didn't destroy anyone, I clarified the truth. Transparency is powerful when used with precision, not rage. Cassie moved on eventually. I heard she took freelance work in another city. Jeremy faded out of the industry. People drift where accountability finds them. I didn't celebrate their absence. I simply stopped letting it define me. Every morning now, when I unlock the office door, I walk in with quiet authority. The kind built from boundaries, not bitterness. Colleagues pause mid-conversation to greet me, not out of fear, but recognition. They know I see things, notice patterns, protect fairness. That awareness shapes the room. During strategy meetings, I speak first, not last. I lead with clarity, not caution. When my team hesitates over an idea, I tell them what my mentor once told me. Instincts are evidence too. The younger women on the team often linger after presentations, asking about career paths, about confidence, about what to do when they're underestimated. I don't give speeches. I tell them small truths. Document your work, trust your instincts, don't confuse patience with permission. They write those lines down like mantras. I wish someone had said them to me sooner. Sometimes, late in the evening, when the office empties out and the city glows beyond the windows, I catch my reflection in the same dark glass that once showed my heartbreak. It's the same face, but steadier, the same eyes, but clearer. I remember the moment I tapped Forget This Device on that app. How final it felt, like deleting an entire version of myself that no longer served me. Now, when the screens flicker before a meeting, people glance my way and joke, "Naomi, you're not about to drop any surprises, are you?" I smile. Not unless it's good news. Laughter follows, easy and genuine. The legend has softened into humor, the tension turned into respect. What happened that winter isn't my shame story. It's my origin story, the point where survival became design. My blueprint, because in the end, it wasn't about exposing anyone. It was about illuminating what was already there and refusing to stand in the shadows of it. The city outside still moves in seasons. Snow melts, rivers thaw, leaves return. Life doesn't pause for anyone's revelation. But sometimes, when I walk home through evening snow, I think about that intern and the question she didn't realize she was really asking. Can strength look like silence? Yes, it can. It looks like staying calm when chaos begs you to break. It looks like walking away with your head high instead of your heart heavy. It looks like holding power without needing to prove it. I reach my building, climb the stairs, unlock the door. The apartment greets me with the soft hum of familiarity. I set down my bag, make tea, open the window an inch to let in the frozen air. Milwaukee glitters below, each light a small proof of persistence. I sit by the window, sip, and let the warmth travel through me. The steam curls upward and disappears, but the calm stays. Maybe that's the real ending, not justice or revenge, but peace. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind you build, one deliberate choice at a time. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.